The first two movies, while action movies, spent a lot of time not having action elements because they were world building. Well, this one feels like we already know the world, so we don't need to spend as much time getting to know it. Therefore, it is the most action-packed of the three movies. Pretty much from the beginning, we are going. Considering it's over 3 hours long, it's impressive how little time it spends catching its breath. The question is, will it being a strictly more action movie help it in the action rankings? Welcome back to another episode of The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be continuing to rank action movies. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, I'm going to give you a brief agenda. We start with the potent notables, which are just a few interesting facts or tidbits that I found out about the movie. Then I go into the movie overview, which is typically me talking about everything that happens in the movie, but for a new one like this, I'm going to avoid spoilers.
Not all of it, but some.
And then I do the rank, where I rank the movie in 10 categories based on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, all to find out what are the best action movies of all time. And today, I'm going to be ranking Avatar, Fire and Ash, the 2025 action epic starring Sam Worthington, Zoe Saldaña, Sigourney Weaver, and Kate Winslet. With a story by Shane Salerno, Josh Friedman, Amanda Silver, Rick Jaffa, and James Cameron, a screenplay written by Amanda Fuller, Rick Jaffa, and James Cameron, and directed by James Cameron. So will this one stand up to the first two Avatars? Is it one of the best action movies of all time? Let's find out, starting with the potent notables.
Potent notables.
As always, we start the potent notables with the box office results. Now, I'm recording this the Tuesday after Avatar Fire and Ash came out, and it made $89.2 million domestically and $258.2 million internationally for a worldwide total of $347.3 million in its first weekend of release. But this was against a budget of $400 million. Once again, just an absolutely insane budget from James Cameron. So with that budget, you know it's got to make at least $800 million for it to make money, according to the studios. So it's still got a ways to go. I don't know how this is going to keep working out for Cameron, but I'm curious if this will end his untouchable streak. Now, James Cameron revealed that this third film is going to introduce us to the Ash people of the Na'vi. He said he wanted to reveal the Na'vi from another angle because so far, he's only shown their good sides. In the early films, there are very negative human examples and very positive Na'vi examples. In Avatar 3, he decided to do the reverse. Now, James Cameron decided he wanted to shoot these at a really high frame rate because according to him, it takes the glass out of the window to reality. So he ended up shooting about 40% of the movie at 48 frames per second, which he did for Way of Water as well. Now, he has received some criticism for these frame rates and his use of 3D. His response, quote, "I think $2.3 billion says you might be wrong on that." Kind of hard to argue against that. Interestingly, James Cameron had said that he was ready to end the series after this film if Way of Water wasn't profitable. But as for this one, he said it took him a long time to find a title that was fitting. So if you think of fire as hatred, anger, violence, that sort of thing, and ash as the aftermath being grief and loss, and what does that cause in the future? More violence, more anger, more hatred. It's a vicious cycle. So that was the thinking. That's what James Cameron said. Now, finding this before I watched it, I was like, oh man, what am I in for here? But to that point, the Makwan are a reflection of the worst elements of the Na'vi. They represent disconnection from nature, the opposite of what we've seen from the previous two clans of the Na'vi. But those are the potent notables. Let's dive into the movie overview. Welcome back to Pandora. It's been a few years, and yet it feels really familiar, am I right? We've got magnetic devil fluxes, wind traders, and evil Na'vi this time, though. Of course, we still have floating islands, Awa, and petulant Sully teenagers. Loak, like the last movie, is going to be driving the plot for us. But for the first time in an Avatar movie, Jake Sully isn't going to be doing the voiceover narration. This time, it's Loak Sully. Now, in the first movie, we had an explanation for the voiceover narration. But just like the last one, there's no explanation for voiceover this time. The other big difference between this sequel and the last one is that there isn't a large passage of time to account for. So we're picking up the story from right where we left off. The Sullys are still living with the Sea People. Spider has been kind of sort of adopted by Jake, but Neytiri is still racist against humans. We even get a new term for humans that I don't remember hearing in the last movie. Maybe it was there, but pink skins. And pink skins is said kind of with a gag, pink skins. As for the humans, the Lady General is still around, generaling. Giovanni Ribisi is back. This felt weird because he wasn't in the second movie at all, really, except for a flashback. But then he was kind of in a lot of this one. Quaritch is still alive and he's still bent on revenge, still villainous. I still don't get why he can't let this go. And you may say, well, there wouldn't be a villain if he could just let this go. But to that I counter, I'm sure humanity could think of another villain. I mean, the whaling boat captain guy is still alive somehow, which I was surprised to find out. He just has a metal arm now. Also, he continues to be a giant piece of shit because although unobtainium isn't a thing anymore, Amrita still is. But what we've really got here is an allegory to European colonialism, especially, from my estimation, the colonization of North America. And I'm sure that's the colonization that James Cameron is the most familiar with, so it makes sense. But yeah, basically the Na'vi are the Native Americans and the humans are the Europeans that came and tried to civilize the country that they lived in. Imagine the colonization process if Europeans had the tech that the humans have in this movie. I mean, it was already a genocide, so I suppose it would be genocidier? Anyway, with European colonization of North America, European nations often utilized the factionalism that already existed in native culture to their advantage, pitting one against another. You know, the classic divide and conquer. Well, enter the Makwan, James Cameron's answer to the Mohegans or Narragansetts, who helped the English defeat the Wampanoag. You know, the tribe that we Americans give thanks to every November. So the Makwans are almost cartoonishly evil. And I think I can tell you their backstory without giving any spoilers. So basically their clan village was destroyed by a volcano, and because Awa didn't answer their prayers, they decided to turn against Awa, which meant that they turned against, well, everything living on Pandora. And if you're thinking, boy, that feels kind of flimsy, you'd be right. Now the plot gets started by Jake realizing that they can't take care of Spider because of his annoying need to breathe. So he needs a mask to breathe Pandoran air, something the Na'vi don't make. So when the Wind Traders make their first appearance, which was admittedly cool, Jake comes up with the idea to send Spider with them because they can take him back to the Forest Clans. And before I go on, I just want to mention that the Wind Traders are using giant living creatures that essentially float, but they're also using some kind of flammable, like hot air balloon and sails to get around Pandora. So essentially they're old school trading ships that don't sail on water. Anyway, all the kids are super mad at Jake and Neytiri for this idea to send Spider away. So Jake comes up with the compromise that they'll all go with Spider and it'll be like a family adventure. But of course, then they'll come back and leave Spider there. Naturally, not only does this get them caught by humans who see Sully in satellite or some other kind of, imagery from above, but the Makwan Raiders just happen to attack this particular Wind Trader. So we're introduced to their bloodthirsty ways and how they just don't seem to care about the connection that every living being has in this world. Because they hate Awa now. On top of this storyline, we have Loak's guilt about Natayam. He believes that he got his brother killed, and his dad, Jake, isn't helping matters. Of course, Jake is just projecting his own guilt onto Loak, but that's a lot for a teenager to take on. Loak is definitely less petulant in this one, but there's still this clawing need to be approved of by his father, which is another dichotomy that they show, with Quaritch being interested in being a father to Spider as well. Interestingly, at times, Quaritch almost seems like a better father than Sully. Maybe not better, just more accepting maybe? I don't know. It was just interesting. And the last big storyline is that the Tulkun are still involved. They still need to be saved because the whaling boat captain is still alive and he still wants more of that Amrita. So this subplot is built in, though it does feel superfluous. I kind of wish that Cameron had either chosen to go with the plot with the Makwan or the plot with the Tulkun, and just given us a little more of one or the other. He gave us a lot of the Tulkun in the last one, so we understand them, assuming you've seen the previous movie. However, relying on the previous movie to help tell this one's story isn't beneficial, and it takes away time where we could have had more development of the Makwan. Because when it comes to the Makwan, I feel like that tribe could have just moved to a different location and everything would have been fine. Awa would have provided. I mean, the Omitakaya lost home tree in the first one and they just found a new home. They didn't just go around bitching about Awa and attacking other Na'vi. Anyway, that's why it feels less developed to me. But here's where the movie shines though. The first two movies, while action movies, spent a lot of time not having action elements because they were world building. Well, this one feels like we already know the world, so we don't need to spend as much time getting to know it. Therefore, it is the most action-packed of the three movies. Pretty much from the beginning, we are going. Considering it's over 3 hours long, it's impressive how little time it spends catching its breath. The question is, will it being a strictly more action movie help it in the action rankings? Let's find out. Let's go to the rank.
A rank.
So the rank is where I rank the movie based on 10 categories: story, acting originality, action sequences, film coherence, hero appeal, villain appeal / hatred, supporting characters appeal, the final showdown, and my rank. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And before I dive into the rankings here, if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But the first category is story, and the story is basically the first Avatar story, but we add in some bad Na'vi this time. It's not like the story was bad, so how can I give it a bad score, right? The good about it is that we continue to ground the characters with emotional weight. I like that, and it works well. Still though, are we going to the well one too many times here? I really don't think we need to have Quaritch remain any longer. I decided to give it a 3.5. So this brings us to acting. This is such a weird feeling because if you all watched or listened to the episode I did on The Way of Water, you know I kind of blasted Sigourney Weaver's angsty teen acting. Well, it was better this time, but still not as good as everyone else's. And the reason it feels weird to me is because I really love that character. I think there were moments where not everybody was great. For the most part, it was pretty excellent, so I gave it a 4.25. And that brings us to originality. And part of originality for me is, does it stand on its own as a sequel? Like, do you need to have watched the other movies to understand what's going on here? And I think the audience is definitely expected to have at least seen the last Avatar movie. I don't think it wouldn't make sense without it, but they don't explain Amrita and how they get it, so I would think that that would be lost on people who haven't seen the previous entry. Also, the first two explored two very different aspects of this world, which made the originality seem higher. Now we're just living in it and sort of telling a similar story to the first one. So I gave originality a 1.5. So that brings us to action sequences. This was definitely the most action-packed of all three Avatar films. The other two really wanted to show these different aspects of Pandora, and I suspected we were going to be getting the same thing here with this new tribe coming in. But we didn't really. It really only slowed down a couple times. It was excellent. I gave it a 5. So that brings us to film coherence. So I'm going to start out with the obvious. This movie did not really need to be this long.
Someone had to say it.
We get introduced to some more interesting cultural aspects of the Na'vi, like wind traders and the Makwan, but in the end, it's still really just humans versus Na'vi. And I don't really know that introducing the Makwan got us anything. It feels superfluous other than adding an aspect to Quaritch's character and the continual allusion to the way Europe colonized North America. That's really my biggest issue with coherence, and it's kind of a big one. I mean, could we still have Quaritch's character arc without them? That's the big question. And I think so. I think it could have been centered around Spider, but you know, they wanted to show a bad side to the Na'vi. So since, at least I feel, we could have removed that whole storyline and still had this movie without it, I gave it a 3.25. All right, so now we go to hero appeal. Okay, I'm ready to say that I'm fully on board with Jake Sully as a hero. He was kind of vanilla for me in the first one. He got better for me with the added emotional weight in the second one. And on this one, I was behind him from the jump, and I loved the nuance of his character arc. So I gave it a 5. And that brings us to villain appeal / hatred. And Quaritch is just a fantastic villain. They did an interesting thing here with him where you really wanted his redemption. And that moved it just that little bit further for me. So I gave him a 5. So that brings us to supporting characters appeal. And I continue to love the supporting characters in this movie. Loak really came into his own here. And I like the dive they did on Neytiri's emotional struggle. Spider is excellent. Kiri is great. My only issue here was the Makwan. They were definitely interesting, but they were kind of devoid of motivation. Okay, something bad happened to their clan, so they turned on Awa. That's basically the whole thing. It just felt weak. So because of that, instead of giving it a 5, I ended up giving it a 4.25. So that brings us to the final showdown. Now, I was really enjoying this final showdown. Probably more than the first two, actually. But then they made a decision that I did not like. It didn't ruin it, but it took it down quite a bit for me. And I don't want to say what it was because I don't want to give away any spoilers. Obviously, the final showdown would be a huge spoiler to say what happened. Basically, I ended up giving it a 3.5. So still really good, but could have been so much better. All right, that brings us to the final category, which is my rank. So as an action movie, I actually think this is better than the first two. I think it's a better action movie than the first two were action movies. There's more action, it's more gripping, and there's less sit around and take in the view. So what's interesting here is I would say it's not as good of a film as the first two, but it's a better action movie. So I'm going to split the difference and give it a 4.5. So that puts the total for Avatar Fire and Ash at a 39.75, which puts it in the tier, I'd watch it again. It was only 0.25 points away from being in the Supreme Cinema tier, and ended up tied with Payback which is just below Bullet and just above Point Break. This also puts it behind the first two Avatar movies, which both made it into Supreme Cinema, with Avatar getting a 42 and Way of Water getting a 40.6. Now, if you're ranking along with me, please leave your scores in the comments. I'd be curious to see them. Thank you for watching and or listening. You can check out my other action movie rankings or any of my other movie or sitcom rankings on this channel. If you'd like an updated list of our action movie rankings, you can do that on the website at therankpodcast.com, where you can also email me at john@therankpodcast.com. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. And if you really want to support the show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/therankpodcast. But that's the whole thing. So, Enagodzi Dalil. If Way of Water wasn't profitable... Oh, sorry.
He does this from time to time.